Thank you all for joining us for the Preventing Fraud and Identity Theft workshop. Joining us today are Jason Chilton, U.S. Bank UNLV Branch Manager, and Anastasia Gina Contreras, U.S. Bank Community Engagement Leader. They are going to discuss the essential steps and actions you need to take to protect yourself, tools available to you, and the do's and don'ts. I'm going to hand it over to them to get us started.
Thank you so much, Carly, and thank you all for joining this morning to talk about how you can protect yourself from identity theft. Now, this is a very, very important topic. If everybody knows how to raise their hand at the very, very bottom of the WebEx screen, is raise hand. If we could, anybody out there who has been impacted by identity theft or has a loved one that has, if they want to put up their hand real fast, so we can kind of get a feel for anybody's experiences for it. I can see Gina out there, Carly, I myself, I can raise my hand too. Excellent. So many of us have experienced or know someone's experienced identity theft. And this is unfortunately a very common thing these days and has actually increased over COVID. There was a study done by Javelin Strategy and Research in 2021 to see how much identity fraud took place in the year 2020. And Americans lost a total of $56 billion in 2020 alone. That's a lot of money. And unfortunately, there's much, much more that goes unreported. So it's a very important topic for us to know about so we can make sure we can protect ourselves properly. But before we get too far along, on the next slide, Gina and myself will go ahead and introduce ourselves. So as Carly was nice enough to say, my name is Jason Chilton, and I work for U.S. Bank. I manage a branch we have right here on campus in the Student Union building. I've been in banking for 15 years. The last 5 have been right here at UNLV. I've worked in many different branches, but this one's my favorite. And it really has to do with these type of things, where students come to me or professors to talk about how they can protect themselves, to learn about other financial wellness topics, and to do these type of seminars, we can teach people how they can protect themselves in the future. And my favorite tip I can give out to people has to go with the mobile apps. Now, these are where most of us look at our banks typically. And what I like to use in mobile apps is alerts. So alerts can help me know when a larger than normal withdrawal happens, or I can set up alerts for my credit score that notifies me any type of change of an inquiry or a different impact, which can be a fast identifier of something going on as far as identity theft, and let us kind of know we can get it fixed right away. And I'll go ahead and give it over to my associate and co-host, Gina Castros.
Thank you so much, Jason. My name is Gina Castros, and I am the Community Engagement Leader here for the U.S. Bank Las Vegas market. I have been in banking for 20 years, and this is absolutely one of my favorite things to do as well, and that's part of why I'm in that community engagement, is bringing things like this to you today. My favorite feature is also with the mobile app on managing cards. I use my card and I don't always put it back in my wallet. I put it in my pocket sometimes and then I forget where it is. So I love the feature that I can go on, place a hold on that card until I find it or actually realize that it is lost or maybe stolen. And at that point, I can report it and order a new card right on my mobile app. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on what we're going to cover today. Next slide, please. What we're going to cover is what is identity theft, how to check for it and recognize it, how to protect yourself and prevent it, and then how to report it if it does happen to you. So on the next slide, we are going to talk about identity theft. So identity theft happens when a family member, a friend, or a complete stranger gets a hold of your personal information and uses it without your permission, usually for purpose of financial benefit, right? So stolen information can include something simple as your name and your address, or it can involve more sensitive information, social security number, account numbers, any additional information they can use. They will use it. All right, so on the next slide, how does identity theft happen? The easiest way, right, is when we lose a wallet or a purse and we accidentally leave our stuff somewhere or it's taken. That's the typical. Data breaches also happen. So companies do a lot and pay a lot for security and different things to keep our information safe, because they, as we enter our information online or provide it to an organization, we're trusting them with our information. And, it does happen. Typically, they'll notify us and let us know what to do at that point and what has happened. So, those are things that are kind of out of our control, but know that corporations are doing things they can do to keep your information safe. Installing malware on your computer. you know, Sometimes we get those emails or text messages of things that are very interesting or kind of grab our attention, like, you won some great prize or just things that are interesting to us. Be careful if you get an email like that that has information that does not look right. So it's either too good to be true, the spelling may be wrong, or it's from somebody that you did not quite contact or ask for that information. All right, the next one is stealing your mail. I'm kind of guilty of it. I don't check my mail on a daily basis and sometimes not even on a weekly basis. But make sure that you are checking it as often as possible to make sure that you are receiving the mail that you should be receiving, and that your information is safe. All right, so taking credit card information, that one is tricky, right? So sometimes when we're calling, we know when we're calling somebody and give them our information. But if somebody calls you and asks you like, hey, I need to get your information, verify who they are first. Never just give your information out. Sometimes people will play on our emotions and say, it's for an urgent event or whatever. So we want to give them our information right away. Be very careful with that. Always verify who you're giving your information to. And then social engineering. Social engineering, same thing is, people will use our information from social media and then try to contact us pretending to be a fake banker, or, a fake teacher, or anything like that. So they'll use information that they have on us. So be very careful with that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to my co-host to talk about how to check for identity theft.
Thank you so much, Gina. So on the next slide here, we'll talk about how we're going to check for identity theft. So the most important thing to remember is that early detection is key. A lot of times there might be a little dollar transaction on our accounts or something very small that takes place. So they're kind of testing the waters as soon things are. And a lot of the bigger things take place down the road. So the earlier we can catch it, we can save ourselves and our loved ones and friends much more money that way. So we want to make sure we detect it right away. So how do we detect it right away? There's a few warning signs we're going to talk about that'll give you a key indicator that maybe someone's stolen your identity. So on the next slide, we'll talk about some of those warning signs. All right, so the first one is if you don't receive your bank statements or bills in the mail. As Gina mentioned earlier, unfortunately, a lot of times they steal your mail. So if you do get those bills and statements in the mail on a regular basis and they did not show up this month, there's a possibility those were stolen in the mail. Now, the reason I'm trying to collect that information is your credit card or your bank statements have a lot of information they need to try to access more information by calling the 1-800 number and get more and more. So it slowly builds up on there. Same thing's going to go with bills that you receive in the mail. Now, the biggest key we can tell you is to set up e-bills and e-statements. If I could, from a show of hands, how many people out there currently use e-statements for their bank account? Excellent. I can see several of you do. Now, this is one of the easiest things you can do. It's easy to go on your mobile app or go on the website and just click that to go ahead and do online statements. It's more secure and it saves some trees as well. Next, if we spot unauthorized transactions on our credit cards or checking accounts. So if we're looking through our statements, as we mentioned earlier, and preferably, not just wait once a month for your statement. I like to check mine every day in the morning when I'm doing breakfast. Let's set up a routine, even if it's just, every Saturday while you're eating breakfast. Go ahead and check your accounts to make sure everything makes sense. Like I said, the sooner we catch things, the better. When we do see an unauthorized transaction on our credit card or a checking account, we want to make sure we file a claim against that right away so the bank is aware of what's going on and they can prevent future things happening on that card. You can do that typically through the mobile app itself or just contact the 1-800 number on the back of your card. Now, if you receive debt collection calls you're not expecting, so, if we aren't paying our bills, we can kind of expect maybe some debt collection calls will happen. But if we think everything's going correctly and we get that debt collection call and we're not expecting it, that could be a good sign that someone's stolen our identity. So a good tip to do is go ahead and collect that collection agency's name, collect all the information about what we're saying the debt is. Don't provide any information to them, and go ahead and write that down And then next, check our credit report, see if there's something on there we don't recognize. We're going to make sure we check all 3 bureaus. Some people only report to 1 bureau. So make sure we're checking all 3 of those. And then we would go ahead and Google the name of this collection agency and find a legitimate phone number to reach them at. So that, just in case it's somebody trying to steal some more information from us. A big one right now with tax season is when you try to file your taxes and find out they've already been filed for you. This is somebody trying to take your tax return. This happens more often than we think. So we want to be careful that not only that tax return is stolen, that means they have all information. They have our name, our social security number. So they could be trying to steal other things. So we want to make sure that we are taking steps to prevent that and that we're contacting the IRS right away to notify them we did not file that tax return. And then if you receive unsolicited emails or texts from your bank. So typically when you go into a bank or if you call the phone, they might try to verify you further. Or if you're trying to change your password online. So if we get a verification email or text, this could be a big sign that somebody's trying to do something on our account that we weren't expecting. So if we do see that happening, we want to contact our bank right away. So once again, if there's information in the email or text, don't use the phone numbers there. We want to make sure that we're using the number on the back of our card, on our statement, or one that we can Google we know is a legitimate one. Now, some other things that we can do that might be warning signs would be surprised if we find our credit report. So hopefully we're all checking our credit report on a yearly basis at the very, very least. And the credit report can go ahead and tell us when there's been inquiries we don't recognize, accounts we don't recognize, or missed payments that we aren't expecting. So anytime that we're seeing things that we don't recognize on that credit report, we're going to make sure that we're taking those steps to go ahead and get those credit reports blocked, and that we're reaching out to whoever that company is that those are on to notify them that we did not apply for those. One thing we see a lot too is mysterious medical bills come in the mail. So unfortunately, right now with money being tight, if someone's trying to get some medical care and they have your information, they might try to use and pretend to be you to get some medical care for free. So we're getting medical bills we don't recognize. Once again, we want to go ahead and Google that, reach out to that company at a legitimate phone number, and just have a conversation to figure out where that came from. If we get some credit cards we're not expecting in the mail, now a lot of these credit cards now allow you to access some money digitally. So they don't really care about getting that credit card. They just want to go get the application in and try to get that digital information and start buying things right away. So if we get a credit card in the mail that we aren't expecting, this is a huge sign that maybe somebody stole our identity and is trying to make some purchases. So once again, we would go ahead and contact that bank, notify them we didn't do this, and make sure that they know to go ahead and get that removed from there for us. And then lastly, if we go to apply for employment and we get declined. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but many employers check your your credit score to see where you stand, and they kind of use that as a way to help them decide who they're hiring. So if you're going through the hiring process, everything's going great, and they get ready to hire you, but they're doing a background check, and they come back and they say that things aren't working out okay, this is probably a good sign. If we have not checked our credit score recently or credit report, let's look out there and see what's going on. Now, one thing we see often at the bank, unfortunately, is that people come to refinance their home or buy a car, and it's right then at that moment when we're doing the application they realize that unfortunately their identity has been stolen. So as we mentioned, just go ahead and monitor your credit score on a regular basis so that you know right away that what's going on, you can correct that and don't have to find out when you really need that money. Because as we know right now with raising interest rates, a few months of waiting to go ahead and get your house refinanced can be a huge loss in money. Now, a tip you can do is a lot of websites like banks, when you log in, through your personal information, you go ahead and find out if anybody's accessed that website recently. So if you're going in there, just double check and make sure that these timelines match up and make sure that nobody's accessing it when we don't expect it. And then our next slide here, Gina's going to go ahead and talk about how we protect ourselves and prevent identity theft.
Thank you, Jason. So yes, we've talked about what identity theft is. Jason shared some warning signs, right? How to recognize it. So now we're going to talk about protecting yourself because, even though it's a felony, police and bankers cannot undo all the damage that has been done. It does take a while. So very important to be vigilant and be able to identify when you think identity theft is happening to you. So we're going to talk on the next slide about the 7 simple habits. So it's going to be a little interactive here. I'm going to ask you to raise your hands a couple of times. So number 1, review all bank statements regularly. I'm going to go ahead and ask you, do you guys do that now? I know Jason and I do. Bankers have the tendency, again, to check on a daily basis. And the beauty of it, right, it's all online now. We don't even have to wait for them to send it to us anymore. All right, number 2, call your credit card company if a statement is late. I know you're looking at this one and going, if they're all online, how would they be late? Well, let me tell you a story of what happened to me. So I've been with Verizon for, gosh, 20 years now. And one day, I handle all the Verizon accounts. I have my children on the account. My husband calls me and he's like, "Hey, I just got a phone call from Verizon and, they asked me all these questions. And now that I just hung up, I don't know that it was right. It just felt wrong." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, let me call you right back." So I hung up with him, called Verizon right away, and within minutes, I got through pretty quickly. And within minutes, they had already changed the address on my account. They had already ordered new items. So I was going to have all these phones I was going to have to pay for. And right, the part about it was that my husband authorized it, and he's an authorized person on the account. How they got his information, I don't know. We don't know till this day, but we were able to catch it and thankfully not have to pay for those items. So, we had to change our passwords, but sometimes it was that quickly. If you don't recognize, it could have been a huge problem for us, right? So very important to make sure when something is late or doesn't come your way that somebody could have changed your information and that's why you didn't get it. So number 3, don't give out personal information. All right, here's another hand raising question. How many of you have gotten those phone calls where sometimes it says scam likely and not always, but they call you and they start asking you questions, right? Like, what is your address? And they want you to verify it. How many of you have gotten those phone calls? I've gotten them a few times and it's like, it's okay to say, whoa, hold on, let me verify who you are. Who are you calling me? And sometimes they'll tell you, well, I'm just trying to verify that I'm speaking to the right person. And they are trying, most likely they are trying to do that because they could be calling anybody as well, correct? Number 4, destroy documents that contain personal information. We get a lot of that junk mail, right? And we just toss it. How many of you just toss it in the mail without shredding it? Yeah, I'm guilty, or I used to be guilty of that, right? So I toss it without, if you don't have a shredder, just rip it up as much as you can before you toss it into the trash or to the recycle bin. Number 5, carry only as many credit cards as you need, right? Sometimes we have more credit cards than we do need, but carry the one that you use, that's a favorite, that you get rewards on, that you use the most, and leave the others at home. And this is because if you lose your wallet, you lose your purse, then you've got that many more companies to deal with on having to call and say, I lost my wallet. So again, just carry the ones that you use. That could also go with Social Security cards. I see sometimes people carry those Social Security cards in their wallets. You might want to just leave that at home and only take it out when needed because I don't think a whole lot of people ask for that nowadays. Number 6, deposit outgoing mail directly into the post office box. Sometimes convenience, right? We put it in a little bin and somebody carries it out. Sometimes it either doesn't get taken out, it could get misplaced. Somebody that's supposed to take it stops to talk to somebody, grab a cup of coffee. You just never know. So the safest way is to put it right into the post office box to make sure that it's going out to who you want it to go out to. All right, and number 7, Jason has mentioned this, review your credit report once a year, right? At least to verify accuracy. Again, if you start getting those weird calls, statements, you might want to check it right away. But here's my hand raising question. How many of you know and have a financial institution that offer it? How many know that that's an option to us? Yeah, most financial institutions, I know that we do have a credit rating where you can go and it does show you, right, that it's going up, down, and shows you some of the recent transactions that have been there. Really cool feature. I love it. Again, I check it out all the time. I want to see it going up. All right, so yeah, so make sure that you do those 7 steps and it should prevent any identity theft and keep your information safe. And now I am going to hand it back over to my co-host.
Thank you so much, Gina. And before we move on to the next slide, I wanted to touch on that part you talked about the credit score. So almost all banks do have it. There's also Credit Karma. There's many ones that we've heard of out there. A big thing they have on those are those alerts. So I use it all the time, and I check on a regular basis by sub-alerts. So any type of inquiry comes in or a change in my credit score, whether it be up and down, it notifies me. So this can be a really fast way to find out if somebody maybe stole my identity is applying for things out there. It might be the quickest indicator out there. So I highly recommend using that if you have access to one, and to set alerts to notify you of those type of changes. Now I know that on the next slide here, we'll talk about, oh, sorry, Gina, I didn't mean. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about protecting yourself online. Now, before I jump into how we protect ourselves online, I want to talk about some scams we see recently. Most of them start taking place online. And actually, we see a new one over the last, actually since the semester began, with many of the students here. I've had 5 separate students approach me here on campus to tell me about this sugar mama, sugar daddy scam. I've never heard it before now, but it's something that seems to be prevalent, at least among college students. But what takes place is somebody who has a page that appears to be a slightly older individual will slide into somebody's DMs or match with them on some type of dating website, and they'll talk to them for a while. And then something will come along where they'll offer them money, typically for some type of personal pictures. And then they'll go ahead and offer us money, send them a check for more than they told them, and ask them to send that extra back to them. This is something that we see on a regular basis. It always is changing. When you're doing something online, whether it be selling something or buying something, any type of interaction online with somebody you haven't met before, and they're talking about sending you a check for more than something is worth, that's a huge indicator it's fraud. Checks are rare these days. It's not how we move money typically. A lot of us use something like Zelle or Cash App to send cash back and forth. The reason they're doing that is when you deposit money at your bank, the bank will give you some money within the next day, but it takes the bank 2 or 3 days to collect that money. So a lot of times people see that money's there the next day. They think, oh, the check's good. This is legitimate. And they send that money off to the individual. And then when that check bounces a couple of days later, they've lost all that money. So it's very important that if you do get contacted by somebody you aren't familiar with and they are talking to you about whatever, and they send you a check, that you know this is probably 100% fraud, especially if they're asking for any money back. If you're not sure, please speak to somebody you're comfortable with, or you can always bring that information down to a banker, and they'd be happy to have that conversation with you and kind of talk you through that. So beyond just avoiding those type of scams, there's other ways to protect ourselves online. So the first one's going to be updating your software on a regular basis, and preferably to set it to update automatically. So that's all like on your iPhone. I know mine updates automatically each night. It updates my apps for me, makes things nice and easy. The reason that's important is the reason they're doing updates very often is to fix different security breaches they have going on. So to make sure that our security is being updated right away so that once these things become known, people can't take advantage of us because we went ahead and updated our software. Now, in the past, people used to send emails with software updates in there. That's extremely rare now. So if you do get one of those emails, as Gina mentioned earlier, don't click on anything that you don't recognize. Go ahead and Google that company's phone number, reach out to them, make sure that it's a legitimate update before we go ahead and update that way. Then we want to make sure we're using strong and unique passwords when we're setting up things online. The keyword here, unique, a lot of us find it hard to do. You know, we want to have a different password for every single place that we sign on to. I know it can be hard to remember those, but they do have some amazing apps out there that help protect and store your passwords for you to make it a little bit easier to remember. And always keep in mind, never ever give out your passwords. No legitimate company should ask you for your password. They have their own way to look into your information. So if somebody calls you and says they need it or they need your login ID, a lot of times that's not legitimate. So never ever give out your password. You want to make sure that you're using strong authentication. So a lot of places now allow you to set up two-step verification process. So I know the most common one for me is my Gmail. So whenever I log into a new phone or a new computer, after I type in my password, it sends me a text message to verify me a little bit further. So if they do offer a way to have a two-step verification process, I highly recommend using that. It makes it much more difficult for somebody to access your information. And as we mentioned earlier today, avoid phishing messages. So if we get an email or a text, or I don't know if everybody's seen one where they get a message on like Instagram or Facebook, and it's like from your friend, it's like, oh, hey, click this. We already know, and our friend immediately later says, I've been hacked. That's because they clicked that message. So if we're getting something that looks unusual, even somebody that we think we trust, we want to make sure we're not clicking those links that don't make any sense so that we aren't downloading any malware on our computers or our apps that cause issues down the road. We want to make sure we manage our digital footprint. This is an important one, and this is one that many of us don't think about. So I don't know if anybody's ever lost their password or login ID. But many times you have verification process. So security questions like, where did you go to high school at? What's the name of your dog? Where were you born? Things like that. Now, unfortunately, most of us put those things online on Facebook. Our dog's name, a lot of people know what high school we went to, where we were born at. So to make it very easy for them to answer those questions. So we want to do one of a couple of things. Either be very careful what we're posting online, or this is an article I read many years ago that Google recommended, and making a fake life. So you'll make up a fake high school you went to, a fake place you were born, a fake dog name, and just use those to answer security questions. Those would be impossible for somebody to figure out because you're the one that knows that fake information because it never took place, right? So that's probably the best route to go. And then a lot of us have some extra cell phones, laptops that we want to maybe get to a family member, friend, or just sell. We want to make sure our information is wiped off those before we hand them out. I mean, we may trust those individuals, but who knows what they're going to do with down the road. Maybe they're going to sell it, so on and so forth. So make sure that your information is completely deleted and erased from that before we hand that to that individual or before we sell it, so our information is not out floating around there. Now, if you want to learn more tips about how to improve your cybersecurity, you can find that online at usbank.com/protectyourselfonline. Now, on the next slide, Gina's going to go ahead and tell us what we do if our identity has been stolen.
Thank you, Jason. So identity theft, as we've gone through this, it can be a really aggravating experience, and we want to help you prevent it. But if it does happen to you, there is 5 steps that you need to follow to help stop it immediately and report it. So step number 1, if you're a U.S. Bank customer, contact our Fraud Liaison Center, and they will help you through the process. I am sure all the other companies contact those companies' fraud departments and let them know that it has happened and report it. They will go through steps with you on verifying what information is accurate and what is not. Step number 2, make sure you contact those credit agencies. And again, if you're using those tools, you already know, but contact them saying this is not, something that I did or created, and let them know immediately to put a hold on your account. Step 3, you want to report the identity theft to the Federal Trade Commission. If you go online, there's an affidavit, you complete that, and then you'll take that affidavit with you through the next 2 steps. So step 4, you want to go to your local law enforcement, our local police department, and file a police report. When you do that, make sure that you take as much information of yourself to prove that you're you. Remember, somebody stole your identity. It's going to be a little bit tough when you're trying to prove, right? Because now companies and people are going, wait, who's the real person? So you want to take as much information and let them know, right? It could be a utility bill, proof of address, and any information that you can think of. You want to keep all that information together. And then on step 5, you want to combine your police report and identity theft report and identity theft affidavit and create an identity theft report. So this will follow you along as you go through, and maybe you're going to buy a new car or something, anywhere where your credit is ran. It's going to take a couple extra steps before you can move on to do those new things that you want to do. So 5, not necessarily simple steps, but 5 steps to help you along the way. Contact your banker and they'll help you with this information. If you have not already gotten the participant guide, that will be sent to you afterwards, after this class. And in there is more information with all those websites that Jason and I mentioned. So don't worry if you didn't write it down. All right, so those are the 5 steps. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Jason.
Thank you so much, Gina. And if we're going to go on to the next slide. And we just wanted to thank everybody for showing up today. We mentioned a lot of information. As Gina said, don't worry if you didn't write it down. We'll be sending out a participant guide to Carly so you guys can all have the information we spoke about today. But let's say you want to know more about identity theft or how to protect yourself online or anything to do with any type of financial topics. It could be credits or saving for college. If you go to usbank.com/financial IQ, They have many, many different topics and many different articles you can read to learn about how you can protect yourself or anything you'd like. Also, keep in mind that us as bankers, especially the ones that work here at the university campus, we chose this job for a reason because we like to help people. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us or stop by the branch and ask questions. We would love, love to help you. When I say that, I also want you to think about when you go to your banks. From time to time when you're making a deposit, especially like when you get that check in the mail, and maybe your banker's asking you a couple of questions, they're not trying to be nosy, they're actually trying to help you out. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's understandable. You can always ask, why are you asking these questions? Maybe they could clarify why they are. But it's very important that you're being upfront and honest with them so they can make sure they can help you to the best of your ability. And if you do get impacted by some type of scam or identity theft, notify your bank right away. And if you do go to them, be as honest and upfront as possible. When the story changes along the line, it makes it very difficult for us to figure out what really happened and be able to help you. So just be upfront and honest, and that way we can help you out. And we have one more slide to pop up for you. All right, so US Bank is actually offering a scholarship. You can take your phones and scan that little code right there. And at this point, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. We'll leave the slide up so you can go ahead and scan it if you'd like to. And if anybody has any questions, please let us know.
So I have a question. I just recently started getting all of these credit card pre-approved things in the mail. Is that kind of a sign that something weird might be happening?
So Carly, that's actually fairly typical. So there's a lot of companies, I don't know if you ever looked at your credit report before or not, but when you do, you'll see two sets of inquiries. We'll say a hard inquiry and we'll say a soft inquiry. So what a lot of companies will do, like banks, they'll reach out to the credit bureaus and they'll ask them for customers they might recommend that might fit a certain product. And they'll give information. That's what they call a soft pull. And you'll see it fall in a different category. And then based on the people that have good credit scores, they go ahead and send out some offers for credit cards. So it doesn't necessarily mean that your identity has been stolen at all. It typically actually means that you have a pretty good credit score at that time. That's a great question, though, Carly. Thank you.
If anyone would like to drop something in the chat, I would be happy to ask it for you.
As we're waiting, one thing I just want to remind everybody is that statistic that Jason shared in the beginning. That was a really big number. And part of the unreported is because sometimes people don't report it because they're lost and don't know where to go. So Jason is right there on campus, but you can call any US banker if they're not available or if you're out somewhere else, and we'd be happy to help walk you through this process. The second one is that sometimes after it does happen to you, it can be embarrassing. So that's why today you're taking the first step to educate yourself and learn. So, and like Jason mentioned, if you let us know, we kind of know what's going on out there because there's new things every day. They get quite creative.
Those are some great points, Janie. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drop in the chat a survey for you to take at your convenience. It really helps us with our programming and just to understand what you learned from the session and how you plan to apply it. And also, it gives us the opportunity to receive any ideas you might have for future programming. Before we end today's session, we would like to thank our presenters for sharing their time and expertise with us today and to thank our participants for joining us.